Hey there, boys and girls of the internet. Man, welcome back to yet another Leadership Academy. I am so pumped and excited to come through with yet another book that I've really enjoyed. Like, I've really loved this book in the last few months, actually, 2 months that I've just really kind of stayed with these ideas. And I wanted to jump in and talk through it. However, this is a really long one because had to really stay with this book. So I'll have a part one and a part two, and so I'll try my best to go through part one, and then I'll come back with part two later on, so that it's not way too long, so that I also don't stretch myself thin. But I will try and really put in the time. So let's go, man. High Output Management by Andrew S. Grove. Now, just a little bit of how I do this is usually when I'm reading books, I'm reading them digitally and I'm taking a bunch of highlights, and then I'll send myself these highlights, and I'll be thinking through it, and then I will highlight the highlights and come here and talk through it. So this is my progressive summarization. But this is a really good book. I feel like this book came in my life just when I finally had all the ideas that could help me really understand this book. And I was also finally at a stage in my life and in my career where some of these ideas really begin to make sense, because I'm now finally at a place where I can influence a bunch of people, and I have a bunch of subordinates, and I also have a bunch of people that I'm reporting to, and just seeing this thing is amazing. So let's just jump into it. As usual, I'll only be reading the highlights. So this is a part of the introduction. He says all managers in such companies need to adapt to the new environment. What are the rules of this new environment? First, everything happens faster. Second, anything that can be done will be done, if not by you, then by someone else. Let there be no misunderstanding. These changes lead to a less kind, less gentle, and less predictable workspace. And still, here in the introduction, we started by telling people why, like managers, why we need to level up. It's because things are changing, and things are changing fast. Again, as a manager in such a workplace, you need to develop a higher tolerance for disorder. Now, you should still not accept disorder. In fact, you should do your best to drive what's around you to order. Also, this is very important to me because I'm coming in a space of my life where I feel like I'm really dealing with chaos and ambiguity and lack of clarity in my workplace and where I'm working, and those are the kind of changes that I'm trying to push in my life and in my work environment. And when I saw this, it was like permission to me that you need to develop a high tolerance for disorder and then not accept it. You need to try to do the impossible, to anticipate the unexpected. And when the unexpected happens, you should double your efforts to make order from disorder it creates in your life. And I think he's just talking about the change that is happening. And I think because this introduction he wrote in this fourth edition, or this whatever edition this is, the one that I got, a lot of changes had happened in the industry since he wrote this book back in 94. And so he says for him to thrive in the industry is you need to anticipate the unexpected, and when it happens you need to double your efforts to make order from it, from disorder that it creates in your life. So you're always going to have, and I think this book is what one of the things that this book is doing for me, it's kind of trying to teach you that you're always going to have a lot of chaos happening in very short periods in your life and in your career, and you want to make the best out of these situations that are always going to happen. He says let chaos reign, then reign in the chaos. As a micro CEO, you can improve your own and your group's performance and productivity whether or not the rest of the company follows. And I also think this was for me this was also huge, like permission that, man, you can improve your own group's performance and productivity. Just know that, okay? You can improve your own and you can improve your groups. Just know that I'm telling you, you can do it. Now, don't wait for these principles and practices you find appealing to be imposed from the top. No, 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 no. You can start implementing these ideas. And I think he said that this book is writing especially to middle managers and people who are like in the middle. Maybe he assumes that if you're a senior manager, you already have these skills, either just as a function of experience or maybe you've interfaced with these ideas before. But if you're a middle manager in any capacity, or if you're a knowledge manager, which he describes in this book as a knowledge specialist who disseminates information, you're always going to feel like, man, I do not have enough tools and authority to do these things. But he's telling you, do not wait for these principles to be imposed from the top. You can do it. And so he goes ahead. So I'll be drinking water. In the introduction, I just gives you a summary of what this book is about. And really, this book is so fascinating because it's about divided in 3 parts. And that's what you're going to see. But you really have to stay with this book a little bit for you to really start to really see it. So he said the first is an output-oriented approach to management. The first is an output-oriented approach to management. What does that mean? We'll see. That is to say, we apply some of the principles and disciplines of the most output-oriented endeavors, which is manufacturing, to other forms of business enterprise, including most emphatically the work of managers. So we're going to apply the disciplines of manufacturing and production in management. And for me, this was like so fascinating because I had just come from reading The Goal a few months before this book, so it made total sense to me. And also, I'm involved in like a production environment too. This idea is summed up in what I regard as the single most important sentence of this book. The output of a manager is the output of the organizational units under his or her supervision or influence. Fascinating, powerful ideas on leverage and how a manager can find leverage, and he'll talk about it more in the book. This is just part of the introduction, but I feel like I should talk about it. The question then becomes, what can managers do to increase the output of their teams? Put another way, what specifically should they be doing during the day when a virtually limitless number of possible tasks calls for their attention? To give you a way to answer the question, I introduced the concept of managerial leverage, which measures the impact of what managers do to increase the output of their teams. High managerial productivity, I argue, depends largely on choosing to perform tasks that possess high leverage. Oh man, this idea is so hot, and it's such a new way for me to look at life, and such a new, how can I say, I couldn't see this before. How can I talk about it? Let me talk about a different book that I read that helped me to, or maybe I should just wait until, let me just tell you guys, let me just preempt, because when ideas are hot, so we're just going to break down these ideas. 2 ideas about leverage that I had coming into this, and that really solidified this thinking, and it was like a mind-opening moment. Number 1 was the idea that Naval talked about in his YouTube videos. So Naval is like this venture capitalist in technology, and he said that leverage could be you could leverage like code or media, and these are things that could elevate your output. And so when Naval was talking about this, really he was talking about on an individual basis. As an individual, if you have code, it can do a bunch of work for you. Also, if you have media, you do not have, like, if you're, maybe say if this was a presentation and I'm teaching you something, I do not have to teach this lesson so many more times. Or if I have a book, I do not have to come and give this talk so many more times. That media is leverage. It allows me to say the same message to many people using just like a book or a blog or a YouTube video. And so those are the first times that I was introduced to this idea of leverage. It's like you do not have to use your own efforts. It doesn't have, like, your work and the money that you get doesn't have to be as an impact of your own efforts. And that was the first time I had that idea. The second time I had that idea, that was so fascinating and I couldn't understand it. In fact, I reread that book after reading this high output management, and this book is called Managing the Professional Services Firm by David Meister. David Meister talks about the idea of somebody getting leverage, so a manager getting leverage or a CEO getting leverage by hiring a bunch of juniors to do the lower level tasks so that he or she can concentrate on the high value tasks. And it makes you ask the question, is it possible that there are low level tasks and high value tasks? Now, when you come back to this idea of high managerial productivity, you start to learn that, oh wow, actually there's a set of activities that if you pick and choose from them, it gives you more leverage than if you just like did all the work that could ever be done in the organization or in your work center or something. So this second idea is huge, it's fascinating. And he introduces this idea that I never knew until I came into this book. The second idea is that the work of a business, of a government bureaucracy, of most forms of human activity is something pursued not by individuals but by teams. Big second idea. Number one, management could be assimilated to manufacturing environment and production practices. Number two, business is not done by people but by teams. Ooh, why did I not see that before? We'll see. And the third idea in this book is that peak performance is elicited from individuals. No, wait, a team will perform well only if peak performance is elicited from individuals in it. This is the third idea in the book. Can a business use whatever it is that motivates an athlete to put out his personal best consistently? I think business can, which is why I examine the sports analogy and the role of something called task-relevant feedback to get and sustain a high level of performance from the members of a business or a team. These are the three core ideas in this book. Fascinating core ideas that I think they shift how you think about management and they shift how you think about to manage teams. And then he continues in this introduction. So if you want to work and continue to work, you must continually dedicate yourself to retaining your individual competitive advantage. You must keep learning. You must keep getting better. As a general rule, you have to accept that no matter where you work, you are not an employee. You are in business with one employee, yourself. Wow. You're in competition with millions of similar businesses. So you want to sharpen your competitive advantage. The point is, the cliches of globalization and the information revolution have real meaning, potentially deadly meaning for your career. The sad news is nobody owes your career, man. You owe it as a sole proprietor. You must compete with the millions of individuals every day, and every day you must enhance your value, hone your competitive advantage, learn, adapt, get out of the way, move from job to job, even industry to industry if you must, and retrench if you need to do in order to start again. The key task is to manage your career so that you do not become a casualty. In this new season, in this new information wave, you're going to become a casualty. If you're not going to upgrade as a manager of yourself, you're going to become a casualty. They'll cut you. They will cut you, whoever they are. So now how do you add more value? And he gives you the answer by continually looking for ways to make things truly better in your department. You're a manager. The central thought of my book is that the output of a manager, the output of your organization, in principle, every hour of your day should be spent increasing the output or the value of the output of the people whom you're responsible for. Never had I ever had these ideas before. Every hour of my day should be spent increasing either the output or the value of the output of the people that I'm responsible for, not just even myself, not my own activities, but theirs. So a few questions. One, are you adding real value or just merely passing information along? Because you could pass information along. And then number two, are you plugged into what's happening around you? And that includes what's happening inside your company as well as inside your industry as a whole. Or do you wait for supervisor or others to interpret whatever is happening? Are you a node connected to a network of plugged in people, or are you floating by yourself? Number three, are you trying new ideas, new techniques, new technologies? And I mean personally trying them, not just reading about them. Or are you waiting for others to figure it out, how they can re-engineer your workplace and you out of that workplace? Because people are going to figure out how to get you out of this work. From my own experience at Intel, I strongly believe that applying the methods of production, exercising managerial leverage, and eliciting an athlete's desire for peak performance can help nearly everyone. Lawyers, teachers, engineers, supervisors, even book editors, in short, middle managers of all kinds, to work more productively. And that's the introduction of the book. And then the foreword will come. I think highlighted a few things from the foreword. Yeah, I think maybe just one line from a foreword. The foreword was done by Ben Horowitz, who is the author of The Hard Thing About Hard Things, which is the book that actually got me into this book. After working through and reading through The Hard Thing About Hard Things, he talked about how this book was a huge influence to him. And I always had wanted to read this book. It was on my Goodreads, want to read someday type books, but I had never felt the pressure of actually getting it. And so when he said that, immediately that was the next book I got. And he says, Ben Horowitz says, if you only understand one thing about building products, you must understand that energy put in early in the process pays off tenfold, and energy put in the end of the program pays off negative tenfold. Yeah, I think this is forward by Ben. Alright, so then we move into chapter 1, which is the basics of production and delivering a breakfast. Now, I just have to talk about the ideas in Dr. Goldratt's theory of constraints at the goal. I feel 100%, or I think rather, had I not interfaced with the ideas from TOC, I wouldn't find so much value out of this part 1. I had read TOC, the goal, and then consequently I watched a lot of videos on YouTube about how to implement theory of constraints in a business and a manufacturing environment. And theory of constraints really says you find the limiting step, the hardest thing, and then you work backwards. That's actually the whole book. It's like a 300-page novel. And then he talks about this idea in chapter 1. The basics of production, delivering a breakfast, or a college graduate, or a compiler, or a convicted criminal. What are the basics of production? So let's just look at the highlights. Of course, it would have this section could make more sense with diagrams, but I haven't imported any diagrams, so we're just going to read through the highlights that are highlighted. A common rule we should always try to hit is to detect and fix any problem in a production process at the lowest value stage possible. This is going to be a big idea in managing production. You want to fix any process at the lowest value stage possible, and he says think about a raw egg and not a boiled egg, right? Second highlight, these are to build and deliver products in response to the demands of the customer at a scheduled delivery time, at an acceptable quality level, and the lowest possible cost. The first thing we must do is to pin down the step in the flow that will determine the overall shape of our operation, and we call this the limiting step. And here I highlighted and say this is Dr. Goldratt's TOC. We look at process and we find the constraint. Okay, but first of all, this book was so hard to highlight. I don't know, the writing style is huge prose. Like, man, he so many words that are so many ideas are interconnected, like a good long speech. And it's not like other books that have been edited and edited that almost a paragraph is an idea on its own. So just highlighting, you'd end up highlighting like 5 paragraphs if you wanted to get one idea out. So maybe that's why I had a struggle with the highlights, especially this style of highlighting quotes. When this book, it was so tough. Look at this. The key idea that we construct our production flow by starting with the longest or most difficult or most sensitive or most expensive step and work our way back. Notice when each of these 3 steps began and ended, we planned our flow around the most critical step, the time required to boil the egg, and we staggered each of the other steps according to the individual throughput times. Again, in production jargon, we offset them from each other. And that's like a Gantt chart where production follows like a linear sequence of time, but it is offset against each other, but it is offset against the constraint. So, and he encourages you or teaches you that this is how you think about this principles of production in any single step, and even managerial work. And you'll see how he's going to bring this idea in managerial work, this idea in even just very weird activities, like how to plan your activities. You find the hardest and then you plan everything else as like a production process. And so it's a little bit of a benefit if you've ever been in a production environment before, if you've ever been in a manufacturing environment before, if you've watched a few videos of like a manufacturing line and you understand the process, and you could see how they process or produce something. Those ideas, similar ideas, are now being brought into management, and it's very important that you understand those processes. So he's talking about them here. The 3 fundamental types of production processes or production operations. There's process manufacturing, process assembly, and then test operations. So let me finish reading it. 1. Process manufacturing. It's an activity that physically or chemically changes material just by boiling, changes an egg. Assembly, in which components are put together to constitute a new entity, just as the egg, the toast, and the coffee together make a breakfast. And the test, which subjects the components or the total to an examination of its characteristics. There are, for example, visual tests made at a point in the breakfast production process. You can see that the coffee is steaming and the toast is brown. So process assembly and test operations can be readily applied to very different kinds of productive work. Then he gives a long explanation here about tech. For instance, the task of training a sales force to sell a new product. And then he talks about these 3 steps. The combination of the various sales strategies to a coherent program can be compared to an assembly step. You assemble strategies into one program. That's the assembly step. Okay. Now, the test operation comes in the form of a dry run presentation with a select group of field sales personnel and field sales management. If the dry run fails the test, the materials must be reworked, right, to meet the concerns. So here we can see these 3 process manufacturing, assembly, and test operations. All right. So we continue with another very long highlight because of the writing style. In any case, the development of the individual pieces out of which the compiler is built represents a series of processing steps. Actual working pieces of software are generated out of specifications and basic design know-how. Each piece then undergoes an individual operation called a unit test. When one fails, the defective portion of the software is returned to the process phase for rework. After all the pieces pass their respective unit tests, they are assembled to form the compiler. Then, of course, a system test is performed on the complete product before it is shipped to the customer. Time offsets are used extensively in the task. Because throughput times of the various engineering steps are well established, the timing of the releases of various bodies of software from one stage to another can all be calculated and staged in advance. This, especially this part, it's so strange that he's using an idea of, for example, here how to make a compiler. But he wants you to see an important idea, that any single production, any single work that you do could be broken down into a production process. It could be rethought how production and manufacturing works. And that's why he's going to use very, very weird ideas. He's going to use idea like delivering a breakfast, or a college graduate, or a compiler, or a convicted criminal. And he's going to say the same idea in 4 different strange ways. But after he says it, you can see it. You can see these different types of production processes that are being applied to each of the steps. And once you see it, when he moves to how to use it in management, it makes sense. Okay. And around almost at the final, he says, at the final of the chapter, breakfast preparation, college recruiting, sales training, compiler design are very much unlike one another, but all of them possess a basically similar flow of activity to produce a specific output. Now, so now that he shows you that, he's going to talk about something else. Because each alternative costs money, your task is to find the most cost-effective way to deploy your resources, the key to optimizing all types of productive work. Bear in mind that in this and in other such situations, there is a right answer, the one that can give you the best delivery time and product quality at the lowest possible cost. To find that right answer, you must develop a clear understanding of the trade-offs between the various factors: manpower, capacity, and inventory. And you must reduce the understanding to a quantifiable set of relationships. You probably won't use a stopwatch to conduct time and motion study of the person behind a toaster, nor will you calculate the precise trade-offs between the costs of toast inventory and the added toaster capacity in the mathematical terms. What is important is the thinking you force yourself to go through to understand the relationship between the various aspects of your production process. Just look at that one paragraph, man. It's packed, loaded with insight that you have to unpack. That there is a right answer in any type of productive work. There's a right answer, and it is your goal as a manager to find this right answer, to have a clear understanding of what you need to trade off in order for you to get this right answer. And then you must reduce it to a simple set of relationships. Fascinating this. I especially just thought this is a very good mental model or thinking or problem solving ability, that I thought it was just so fascinating that even he said that in a paragraph, that this is a thinking that you want to build. Let's move on. And this book is packed with such type of thinking. You can just tell that a lot of these words have really been thought out. It's so fascinating the way he writes. I can understand why this is like a managerial classic, right? Because he tells you things in a paragraph that you could write an essay about, right? Okay. But continuous operations, so okay, so here we're going to move into continuous operations. This chapter 1 is so dense. Like I said, it has to be explained in charts, and there are a bunch of charts in the book actually. There's a bunch of drawings and charts in the book for you to really understand the production process, and I think maybe I might review those charts later on at a later stage, but you can't copy highlights from an ebook. So here you're talking about continuous operation. So now you want to move into continuous operation because now you want to take your production process from just delivering breakfast to like delivering a lot of breakfasts. This is your new goal. You have grown, you have scaled up. He said, but continuous operation does not automatically mean lower cost and better quality. What will happen if the water temperature in the continuous egg boiler quietly went out of specification? The entire work in process, WIP, all the eggs in the boiler and the output of the machine from the time the temperature climbed or dropped to the time of the malfunction was discovered becomes unusable. All the toast is also wasted because now you don't have any eggs to serve with it. How do you minimize the risk of a breakdown of this sort of thing? The answer, performing functional tests, is one way. And so now he's introducing the ideas of management to manage a production process, because like all these things could go wrong, and if you don't have eyes and ears in the production process, it's going to be horrible. So you perform a functional test. A second way involves in-process inspection, which can take many forms. You could, for example, just simply insert a thermometer in the water so that the temperature could easily be and frequently be checked. Right? Now, to avoid such problems, okay, let's go to the whole sentence. What else could go wrong with a continuous egg machine? The eggs going into it could be cracked or rotten, or they could be over or undersized, which would affect how fast they cook. To avoid such problem, you want to look at the eggs at the time of the receipt, something called incoming or receiving inspection. So he has given three types of tests: a functional test, in-process inspection, and a receiving inspection. All this, like, you could write a whole essay on these three ideas. And then he continues building on this idea of production. Now, because the cost of the raw material and the cost of money, you should also try to gauge the opportunity at risk. What would it cost if you had to shut your egg machine down for a day? How many customers would you lose? How much would it cost to lower them back? Such questions define the opportunity at risk. Man, again, other questions that you need to ask if you're going to manage this breakfast factory is like, what is your opportunity and what is your opportunity at risk? How much money does it cost? What's the total also cost accounting? What's the total costs that you need to maybe like build up an inventory? And he says you need to ask such questions. So another thing that he introduces in this space or in this part of the book is another thinking process, is a manager needs to develop the right kind of questions and find the answers to those questions. For me, this is fascinating way of thinking. And you want to do this for every other activity. Let's say if it was now college graduates or convicted criminal or a compiler, a good manager needs to have this broken down. So then we're moving to chapter 2, and that was chapter 1. And chapter 1 was fascinating, a fascinating read on the principles of production. And as I said, most of why chapter 1 was so hard for me to highlight. It has a lot of diagrams and a lot of huge sentences because he's describing the process flow. So it will be worth my time to come back and do a different review of the production process just at a separate time. Now chapter 2, we have a breakfast factory, man. So how are we going to manage our breakfast factory? So you say, now, One way to increase productivity is to do whatever we are doing now, but faster. So this could be done by reorganizing the work area or just by working harder. Here, we've not changed the work we do. We just instituted ways to do it faster and get more activities per employee hour to go inside our black box. Because the output of the black box is proportional to the activity that occurs within it. We'll get more output per hour. There is a second way to improve productivity, which we can change, which we can change the nature of work performed. Okay, what we do, not how fast we do it. We want to increase the ratio of the output to activity, thereby increasing output even if the activity per employee hour remains the same. Now the slogan has it, we want to work smarter, not harder. This part of the book really introduces a paradigm shifting moment in how to think about work, and especially for me. Okay, and he introduces the idea of a black box. I have no idea why I never highlighted it, but the black box is this where everything inside our organization, inside our breakfast factory, is happening inside this box, but we have no visibility into this box. The more things we put in here, theoretically we should have more output in there. So we have input and then like a black box and then output. And in fact, he is going to teach you how to peep into the black box, how to see the various activities that are going into the black box. We can assume here that maybe these are maybe like 50, 60, 100, 120 processes that are happening in our black box all at the same time. Go back to our idea of systems working the system book. We can assume that in this black box our production system is happening, our marketing system is happening, our IT system is happening, our sales and marketing, did I say that, system is happening, our procurement and supply chain system is happening. All these activities are happening inside our black box, and he wants you to visualize it as this this black box. You have no really, it's good to visualize it like this, because just looked as a whole, you really can't be able to tell what's going on inside it. But he will teach you how to peep into this black box. Now, this part he says we want to change the nature of our work, which is going to tell you that as now, because we want to change the nature of our work as a manager, we also want you to change the nature of your work, reduce your activity per hour, and then improve your output per activity. Ooh. But to run your operation well, you need a good set of indicators or measurements. Your output, of course, is no longer the breakfast you deliver personally, but rather all the breakfast your factory delivers, profits generated, and satisfaction of your customers. Now, why I highlighted this is because this is systems thinking, and this is what even Dr. Goldratt in TOC was talking about, systems thinking. When I went back to school last year, and the lecturer was talking about the organization, and he said something that resonated with me, so I checked it up later on. He said every time you're looking, let's say you're doing organization design, you don't look at your organization separately. You have to see it as the whole system, as part of the whole system. Systems theory. Basically, in this part, Andy Grove talks about systems thinking, and he wants you to see the entire picture. Your black box is seeing the entire picture of the organization, and not just like a department, like the kitchen department, for example, or the production department, or the marketing department, who are making all the fancy graphics and billboards and videos and marketing materials. No. You want to see the whole scope of the organization, which is a new thinking. I think that maybe it's normal for other managers, for me, but for me it's just so profound to see him like sprinkle ideas of systems thinking and how to see the entire picture, right? All the breakfasts, all the profits, and the satisfaction of your customers, the entire system. Oh, but before that, he says, so you want indicators, that a good set of indicators that will measure the entire output of your organization. So just to get a fix on your output, excuse me, you need a number of indicators. Something on my throat. Just to get a fix on your output, you need a number of indicators. To get efficiency and high output, you need even more of them. The number of possible indicators you can choose is virtually limitless. But for any set of them to be useful, you have to focus each indicator on a specific operational goal. So oh man, this is so fascinating. He's like, so let me just talk about my reason. The reason why I underlined this, you have to focus each indicator on a specific operational goal, is because you then need to know what are your goals, what are your operational goals. Once you have your goals mapped up, then your goals will help you to decide the indicators that are important for you to track. Because bro, there's a meme I saw on Twitter yesterday, really cool meme. Oh man, I should have downloaded it. This guy at the gym has two weights, and the weight has weights. He even has some weight on his head. He has some weights on. It's so funny, and somewhat had wrote all the indicators a small business person needs. So you could have like a limitless set of indicators, and you could track all these really useful things, but it feels useful. I mean, you could track everything. You could track how many people come to the store. You could track their weight. You could track their age, their race. You could use your manpower to track literally anything. But you have to use your operational goals to decide what your indicators are. I think that was one of the most important ideas, and also this is from Dr. Goldratt, that you have to focus. Oh, what was that? Oh, no. I shouldn't have done that. Okay, that sucks. I just cancelled something. I didn't know what that thing was. Anyway, let's move on. So because indicators direct one's activities, you should guard against overreacting. This you can do by pairing indicators so that together both effect and counter effect are measured. This is something I never I've never known this. If you have one indicator, you could overreact, but you want to have effect and counter effect, so like two indicators at the same time, so that you do not overreact when you see a certain indicator happening. Listen, so therefore in the inventory example, you need to monitor both inventory levels and the incidence of shortages. A rise in lateral obviously you should do things to keep inventory becoming too low. So you see, if you track incidence of shortages and you actually don't have too many shortages, usually you won't freak out, and then you won't order a bunch of inventory. And so it was really good information for me to learn that when you find indicators, you want to find an effect and a counter effect, and then you want to pair them together. And also a very good way to think about just measurement. Having come to this realization, our company has been using measurements as a key tool to improve our productivity of administrative work for several years. The first rule is that a measurement, or any measurement, is better than none. But generally effective indicator will cover the output of the work unit and not simply the activity involved. Obviously, you measure a salesman by the orders he gets, output, and not the calls he makes, activity. The second criterion for a good indicator is what you measure should be a physical, countable thing. Fascinating. While this may seem obvious, in practice, confidence is not as easy to come by as it sounds. To take big, costly, or worrisome steps when you are not yet sure you have a problem is hard. But unless you are prepared to act on what your leading indicators are telling you, all you will get from monitoring them is anxiety. Thus, the indicators you choose should be credible so that you will in fact act whenever they flash warning signals. I loved this book because he also leaned in to the psychology of a middle manager. Right now, it's like to take big, costly, or worrisome steps is hard, man. Because like, what if I lose my job? Like, what if I'm wrong? Like what if? Just what ifs. So it's hard to make this step. So you want to be prepared to act on leading indicators. So choose indicators and then lean on them to help you to make these decisions. So this also like a decision making and decision science. You want to find good indicators that you can just trust them. And then you also use a stagger chart. Says it is a good idea to use a stagger chart in both manufacturing and sales forecasts. As noted, they will show the trend of change from one forecast to another as well as the actual results. By repeatedly observing the variance from one forecast to another, you will actually pin down the causes of inaccuracy and improve your ability to forecast both orders and the availability of product. So anyways, why you want to use a stagger chart is also a stagger chart is a learning tool, because it's also teaching you where you went wrong when you made your initial forecasts. Like, you made this forecast and this forecast was so wrong. What assumptions did you have when you made those forecasts, and why are they wrong? And then you adjust, you tweak your knowledge, and then as you move on, as time goes on, you start getting better at setting forecasts and you improve your ability to forecast. This was so profound to me because I always wondered, man, now when, especially about this idea of forecasting, I've always had this issue in forecasting. Like, why should I even forecast? I have no idea what to expect from the future, but you want to make an assumption, you want to make a guess of the future and then correct as you go along your way. What is happening, either way, forecasting is hard, so you're going to get better at it as you forecast, as you apply the forecasting ideas and the forecasting principles. So for me, I think especially this idea of a stagger chart of having a forecast and the actuals really helped me, and it was a profound thought in how to manage and which kind of metrics to have. To assure that quality of our products will in fact be acceptable, all production flows must whether they make breakfast or college graduates or software modules, must possess inspection points. Okay, so now he introduces another idea in management which is called inspection points, and I think you have to inspect. You just have to inspect. And it's also very profound to me in just letting me know that if you have, let's just keep reading. Suitably thought through, intelligent inspection schemes can actually increase the efficiency and productivity of any manufacturing or administrative process. So when you think through and you have an intelligent inspection scheme, your manufacturing process could actually benefit from such knowledge. The workings of our black box can furnish us with the simplest and most useful definition of productivity. The productivity of any function occurring within it, it is the output divided by the labor required to generate the output. So now he starts to really go harder in introducing this idea of output in management. Something else can also increase the productivity of the black box. This is called work simplification. How can you simplify work? Of course, the principle of work simplification is hardly new in the widget manufacturing arts. In fact, This is one of the things industrial engineers have been doing for 100 years. But the application of the principle to improve the productivity of the soft professions, the administrative, the professional and managerial workplace is new and slow to take hold. The major problem to be overcome is to defining what the output of such work is or should be. As we will see in the work of the soft professions, it becomes more difficult to distinguish between output and activity. And as noted, stressing output is the key to improving productivity. While looking to increase activity can result in just the opposite. Right? So he builds a case of how to manage a breakfast factory, what you need to have in your black box, what kind of indicators you want to have in your black box so that you can peep. In fact, use that word. Indicators help you to peep into the black box to see what's happening. After that, he introduces the third idea, which is called managerial leverage. Right off the bat, he starts with the definition. We can sum up matters with the proposition that a manager's output is the output of his organization, and the output plus, not and, plus the output of neighboring organizations. Wow. This is the second idea of this book, and it's going to really teach about this book. Let's move to another highlight. Why? Because business and education and even surgery represent work done by teams. Okay, a manager can do his own job, his individual work, and do it well, but he does not constitute that does not constitute his output. If the manager has a group of people reporting to him or a circle of people influenced by him, the manager's output must be measured by the output created by his subordinates and associates. I remember when I finally read this in the book, I closed it and I went to just ponder about, because it was a fresh new idea, an amazing perspective for me. Because now if you're going to have a bunch of people below you, now we're not measuring your output against you. We're measuring your output against the output that your subordinates and your associates, so it's down and horizontally, what they're able to achieve is your output. Fascinating. And I mean, he talks about it a little bit more in the book. I'm unsure if I highlighted that part, and maybe the reason why I'm unsure also is just like the nature of the sentences in this book. Actually, like huge paragraphs that carry a simple idea. Said a marketing analyst who reviews a mountain of product, market and competitive information, analyzes market research, and makes fact-finding visits can directly affect the output of many neighboring organizations. His interpretations of the data and his recommendations will perhaps guide the activities for the whole company. Right, so he also introduces this idea of like a knowledge specialist and a knowledge manager, and the kind of leverage that this knowledge individual brings to the organization when they make this research and they present this fact-finding research. And if this person is credible, his interpretations will guide the activities of the whole company. Therefore, just by this person doing this research and providing these recommendations is an activity of high leverage. Thus, the definition of a manager should be broadened. Individual contributors who gather and disseminate know-how and information should also be seen as middle managers, because they exert great power within the organization. Prior to this, I had never seen this. In fact, I'd always wondered what's the value of knowledge, what's the value of information, what's the value of a good technical education in an organization. But these people should also be considered managers, and we should teach them to exert this information so that it can influence the entire organization. So not only those who, and he'll talk about this later on, about position power people and knowledge power people, just kind of like to help you increase, the boxes that you put managers in. It's going to be very powerful. But the key definition is that the output of a manager is the result achieved by a group, either under her supervision or under her influence. Because it continues to say, while the manager's own work is clearly very important, that in itself does not create output. Her organization does. So by analogy, a coach or a quarterback alone does not score touchdowns and win games. Entire teams, with their participation and guidance and directions, do. League standings are kept by a team, not by individual. Business, and this means not just the business of commerce, but the business of education, the business of government, the business of medicine, is a team activity, and always it takes a team to win. This idea of teamwork is a new concept, and especially for people who work in a space of a lot of ambiguity, where they do not see teams. He starts to show you that actually it's a work of teams. Everything is a work of teams, and a team is the one that wins. So what you want is to make the people that are under your influence win. But output and activity are by no means the same thing. Consider my own role, my own managerial role. As president of a company, I can affect output through my direct subordinates, a group of general managers and others like them, by performing supervisory activities. I can also influence a group under my direct supervision by making observations and suggestions to those who manage them. Both types of activity will, I hope, contribute to my output as a manager by contributing to the output of the company as a whole. I have so much to say about this, but let's read this first of all. Cindy, an engineer at Intel, supervises an engineering group in a wafer fabrication plant. She also spends some of her time as a member of an advisory body that establishes standard procedures by which all the plants through the company perform certain technical process. In both roles, Sandy contributes to the output of the wafer fabrication plants. As a supervising engineer, she performs activities that increase the output of the plant in which she works. As a member of the advisory body, she provides specialized knowledge that will influence and increase the output of neighboring organizations, all other Intel wafer fabrication plants. I remember when I when I read this, and he's going to talk about it, and I will talk even about it even more because it was a mind shift for me, was him letting you know that his managerial activities are not just, I don't know, it's like maybe I used to think that all these like big time CEOs, I have no idea what I thought they did. I don't know, like have meetings and talk with coffee, talk a big about market share, but his activities is very unstructured. It's like just performing supervisory activities, and he's influencing the direct supervision, making observations and suggestions. They cause high output. It was so fascinating for me. Even I think writing this book causes huge leverage and huge output in the organization, because the people who are working can see, they can sense, they can feel, they can be inspired. It starts to teach you how. Now we'll get into that. A manager must keep many balls in the air at the same time and shift his energy and attention to activities that will most increase the output of his organization. In other words, he should move to a point where his leverage will be the greatest. Activity, output, activity, output, productivity, output. How do you get to a level where you're picking a set of activities that has the highest output and focusing on those ones? I think this is the managerial question that now we begin to start to learn and to understand from these ideas. Okay. As you can see, much of my day is spent acquiring information. And as you can see, I use many ways to get it. I read standard reports and memos, but I also get information ad hoc. I talk to people inside the and outside the company, managers at other firms, or financial analysts, or members of the press. Customer complaints, both external and internal, are also very important source of information. Wow. I have to confess, the information most useful to me, and I suspect most useful to all managers, comes from a quick and often casual verbal exchanges. This usually reaches the manager much faster than anything written down, and usually more timely the information, the more valuable it is. The reason why I highlighted this is I remember when I came into these ideas, I had been acting as a manager in somewhere, and I always felt the pressure of formalizing with a formal report. But a lot of the valuable information would come through just like verbal exchanges, right? But it was so fascinating to see that this CEO of Intel also had similar experience. That just these casual exchanges become more valuable than anything written down formally. So then he asks, in that case, why are written reports necessary at all? They obviously can't provide timely information. What they do is constitute an archive of data, help to validate ad hoc inputs, and catch in safety net fashion anything you may have missed. But reports also have another totally different function. As they are formulated and written, the author is forced to be more precise than he might be verbally. This is a new idea also that I learned from the book, is that actually reports are not important, but what reports do is to force you go through the thinking process to write good reports, concise, factual, and to clarify your thinking about different areas. So that's why they're important. And there are many parallels to this, as we'll see later. The preparation of an annual plan is in itself the end, not the resulting bound volume. Similarly, our capital authorization process itself is important, not the authorization itself. Look at this. To prepare and justify a capital spending request, most people go through a lot of soul searching, analysis, and judging, and it is this mental exercise that is valuable. The formal authorization is useful, but because it enforces the discipline of the process. He continues, to improve and maintain your capacity to get information, you have to understand the way it comes to you. There's a hierarchy involved. Verbal sources are the most valuable, but what they provide is also sketchy, incomplete, and sometimes inaccurate, like a newspaper headline that can give you only the general idea of a story. Now, look at this. After this, you should have some reiteration and perspective, which can be compared to reading a news magazine or even a book. Each level of your information hierarchy is important, and you can rely on none alone. The most thorough information might come from a news magazine. You do not, of course, want to wait a full week after an event to find out about it. So I think here we're talking about the 5 different activities of management, and number 1 is information gathering. I had never, I'm telling you, never thought about high leverage activities like this before in my life. In fact, he gave me a lot of power when he started talking about the highest leverage activity is information gathering, just like getting smarter. And I felt like he really talked to me because I like the getting smarter thing and just like knowing, like say, like a bunch of new information. But you want to have many sources. And even if you have the easy one, the verbal one, you should have some reiteration and perspective. So you should probably draw back and go and look at your information sources. So he says your information sources should be you should complement one another, and should also be redundant, because that gives you a way to verify what you have learned. Right. So let's finish from here. There is an especially efficient way to get information much neglected by most managers, and that is to visit a particular place of the company and observe what's going on in there. And so this is still information gathering by visiting, by using your eyes. Again, as I said, it really gave language and power to, do you know, before, like, I used to really get bogged down mentally that maybe as I perform these middle management activities, like, man, I need to be making formal reports about every single thing that I saw. But just observing, just showing up and looking, showing up and seeing gives you information. You are drawing information, looking at pictures, looking at reports, looking at all these things, giving you information. It was so freeing to learn that this is also a managerial activity, and it has such high leverage. Then why are they underutilized? Because of the awkwardness that managers feel about walking through an area without a specific task in mind. At Intel, we combat this problem by using program visits to meant to accomplish formal tasks, but which also set the stage for an ad hoc mini transaction. For example, we asked our managers to participate in Mr. Clean inspections, in which they go to a part of the company that they normally wouldn't visit. The managers examine the housekeeping, the arrangements of things, the labs, and the safety of the equipment, and in so doing spend an hour or so browsing around and getting acquainted with things firsthand. This one of the first comments I made. It was fascinating to learn just visiting a place, a source of information, and thus a managerial activity. Let's finish information gathering first. Also, now we're going into other types of managerial activities, which are about 5. Like I said, there's information gathering, information giving, there's decision making, and then there's nudging, and then what's that, and then the first final one is being a role model. I'm going to talk about that when we come back into part 2. I realized this because just this book influenced me so much. It's possible that this review will take a long time, because I'm still just really happy to have these ideas come in my life right now. And so, man, watch out for part 2. So excited to come back in and just start from here around page 14. Let's go, baby.